Joining us for more is Andy Mock. He's a senior research fellow at the Center for China and Globalization. So, Andy, just a few hours ago here in the United States, the Electoral College affirmed Joe Biden's win. So what happens now with this TikTok lawsuit? Do you feel that the Biden administration will continue what the Trump administration has done? And what is the feeling there in Beijing?
No, I think, first of all, thanks for having me on today, Elaine. I think this is a very important question. The clock is ticking on the Trump administration's ability to pursue this attack against TikTok, Huawei, other Chinese companies. I think the incoming Biden administration, clearly their priorities are focused on domestic issues. COVID-19, economic recovery, racial justice, as well as climate change. So I think by all indications, they're going to pursue a much less ambitious foreign policy and look at it through the lens of economic security. Given that, I think there's room for optimism that certainly the rhetoric and the unwarranted hostility towards many of these Chinese tech companies will be dialed back.
Now, some are concerned that a Biden administration, that Democrats are sort of in with Republicans. It's a bipartisan issue that they agree on. But I want to ask you about the word competition. That's a word we've heard over and over again lately, especially from the U.S. side, when it comes to tech and technology. So can you explain for our audience the Chinese and the U.S. perspective when it comes to competition? Is one side more concerned than the other?
I think certainly there is much more concern on the U.S. side. And Elaine, you mentioned that there is a bipartisan consensus that something needs to be done about this. But I think one of the positive things of a Biden administration is that if we compare Biden to Trump, I would say that Trump is a norm-breaking fantasist in the mold of like a Steve Jobs, who had a reality distortion field and looked to create his own reality, whereas Biden, by contrast, is a pragmatic realist as well as an institutionalist. So what this means is that he will recognize the reality, and here's a couple of facts here in this tech competition. China graduates 6 times as many STEM graduates as the U.S. does. We look at a company like Huawei with 200,000 employees. About 40,000 of them are foreign employees that work in engineering. So China brings some formidable advantages. And to view this as a zero-sum, win-lose competition with China in the technology space, I think is not very practical and not very realistic. And this is where I think a Biden administration, of course, will do its best to protect U.S. interests, but also recognize that there's more to be gained by working with China in technology rather than framing it, again, as this zero-sum competition that the U.S. must win.
Andy, any updates on WeChat? You know, initially this very popular app was also on this U.S. ban list alongside TikTok. Are you hearing anything there?
Well, the latest from a legal perspective is that the Trump administration was blocked by the courts from pursuing this. And I think this shows, one, the system, the American system, working as it is intended, so providing a system of checks and balances against unwise or self-destructive actions. I think also, again, in a Biden administration, this recognition that all countries should be treated with respect, whether they're allies or competitors, and that this notion of seeing how important TikTok is, sorry, not TikTok, but WeChat, is to many Chinese Americans, as well as American businesses that look to do business in China, that we will see a more nuanced and a less pugilistic approach to dealing with WeChat.
And that being said, what do you think are some of the first tangibles we could see delivered when we see a Biden administration come in? Do you think we'll see a little less pressure on Huawei? Do you think we'll see some of these visa issues for scientists, those sort of things sort of ease under Biden?
Well, certainly, I think if President-elect Biden can pursue his agenda, all of these would make sense. Certainly, some sort of resolution to the Zhou case in Canada, a more holistic approach to dealing with Huawei, because we need to recognize that many American jobs, many American companies depend on selling to Huawei. And in the short term, of course, this has repercussions on American companies' revenues, their ability to hire, to keep employees on staff. But from a longer-term strategic perspective, if the U.S. forces China to develop completely independent technology supply chains, it's the companies like the Intels, the NVIDIAs, the Qualcomms that will ultimately lose. We only need to look at recent agreements like RCEP, creating the largest trade region in the world, and linking China, Japan, and South Korea in its first ever free trade agreement, that the economic momentum, the growth, and the reduction in friction of cross-border trade and investment clearly is in Asia. And to shut American businesses out from that, I think, would really be a disservice to American business and American workers.